Today we're going to have some fun painting up this sculpted Eddie from Iron Maiden's album Peace of Mind. I'm going to take some creative license with Eddie because I want to paint him with a blue moonlight glow instead of the yellow backlight that is depicted on the album cover. This tiny miniature measures just 26 millimeters from Eddie's toes to the top of his head, so the details will be a bit challenging. I picked up this miniature by purchasing CMON's Iron Maiden Pack 2, which also contains several other Iron Maiden Eddie mascots. Let's get started, and welcome to Trehane Miniatures. The most important part of painting an Iron Maiden mascot is having the right alcoholic beverage on hand, such as Evolve Brewing's Run to the Hops IPA. This little beauty comes in at 6.66 alcohol by volume, and it tastes delicious. I begin by preparing the model with Rust-Oleum Midnight Blue paint and primer N1. This will act as the base for a blue moonlight glow on the back side of the miniature, as well as the starting point for the shadows on the rest of the mini. I want to paint this miniature in a way that makes it appear that there are two sources of light hitting the miniature. The moonlight glow will affect the back left side of Eddie. I want the natural light to be coming from Eddie's upper right. This lighting style is a cheat of sorts that allows me to paint the model in a shorter amount of time. The blue glow on the back is painted very quickly and takes care of about half of the miniature. This means that I only have to spend time painting the other half of the miniature really well. With the dark blue in place, I'll use Vallejo Azure to establish exactly where the moonlight is landing on Eddie. I like to do this first because it effectively informs me of the area that I don't need to paint with actual colors. After this light spray of Azure through an airbrush, I continue with the same color to intensify the highlights on the backside of Eddie. Depending on how refined I want the model to look when finished, I can accomplish this with dry brushing or by painting each highlight by hand with the standard brush. I'm a pretty big fan of this Eddie sculpt, so I decide to apply the highlights with a standard brush and take my time. I'm using a size 1 synthetic brush for this. This is the backside of the miniature, so I don't feel that the details are quite as important as the front. I like to save my sable brush for the more important details. With the dark blue primer in place, I can jump straight to the mid-tone color for the jeans. The midnight blue is the perfect shadow color for the pants. I can leave quite a bit of the moonlight blue visible and the pants will still look natural. I'm sticking with my size 1 synthetic brush for this color on the pants, but I'll switch to my sable brush for the highlights. I make sure to leave a decent line of midnight blue visible between the flat blue color and the azure highlights that I painted on the back of the mini. For the initial highlight color, I mix some ice yellow into the flat blue. I switch to my size 1 sable brush at this point because I'm going to start to add a little texture to the cloth that will make it look like the natural light is interacting with the surface of the pants. These brush strokes are going to remain visible on the finished miniature, so I want them to be precise. The amount of area that we're painting here is much smaller than the initial blue layer, so it goes pretty fast. For the final highlight, I'm using pure ice yellow. I'm sticking with the size 1 sable brush for this. This size 1 sable brush is the smallest brush that I use for any miniature. The tip is small and pointy enough that I don't see any reason to go smaller. I've tried using smaller synthetic brushes in the past, but the problem that I've always run into is tip drying. With smaller brushes, the paint would sometimes dry so fast that it would dry before I could get it to the model. This ice yellow is primarily used for edge highlighting, but it's also very effective for painting worn areas on the jeans, particularly on the right knee. For the rest of the miniature, I'm base coating with Vallejo Chocolate Brown. I'm going back to my synthetic brush for this. These features include the straitjacket, the padded room, and Eddie's flesh. Unlike the flat blue of the pants, I cover much more of the midnight blue with this chocolate brown. I'm still leaving a small amount of midnight blue between this chocolate brown and the azure on the back, but for the well-lit portions, I'm only leaving midnight blue visible as the shadow color in the deep recesses. For now, I'll focus on the straitjacket with yellow ochre. I'm also returning to my size 1 sable brush, and this is what I'll use for the rest of this paint up. I'm covering most of the chocolate brown layer with yellow ochre. This initial layer is very translucent, which is even more obvious once it dries. This is going to get pretty opaque and bright by the time I'm done. However, the chocolate brown will still have a large impact on the final look of this yellow. I'm obviously not going to get this in the deeply recessed areas. After the first translucent layer, I will continue to build up the opacity of this color in a few passes. As I progress, I'll cover less area with each pass and focus more and more on the raised surfaces. It's subtle, but the brown is actually much more visible than how it appears when I'm finished with this color. The effect of the brown is much more apparent once I complete the off-white layer that comes next. And while it's on my brush, I also use yellow ochre for Eddie's teeth. Obviously, I forgot about that here and ended up painting the teeth a little later in the process. For the final highlight, I'm using Mummy Robe by the Army Painter. Perhaps this is an obvious choice given the fact that Eddie looks quite a bit like a mummy. I try to avoid using pure white as a standalone color on any of my miniatures, which is why I'm choosing this off-white color here. Now I'm very much focused on creating texture with these highlights. I'm covering more area than usual considering that this is the final highlight color for the straitjacket. This is because I want this jacket to look more white than yellow. Of course, I don't want it to look pure white. I want this jacket to have the look of old canvas material that has yellowed over time. I feel like this progression of colors is achieving this look nicely. I haven't focused on it in this video, but I painted the padded floor in the exact same manner as the straitjacket. The one slight adjustment I made was to use the Mummy Robe to create more texture on this base, thereby allowing more of the yellow ochre color to show through. Finally, we're painting Eddie's flesh. I'm beginning with orange-brown over the chocolate brown base layer. Unlike the straitjacket, where I covered most of the chocolate brown with yellow ochre, for the skin, I'm going to leave a little more of the chocolate brown showing, especially in the sunken areas like below the cheekbones and the inner part of the eye sockets. This means that instead of simply laying down a full base coat with this mid-tone color, I'm beginning to shape his features and inform how the light is interacting with the skin. Almost every part of the face and feet where I apply the orange-brown will have some chocolate brown remaining around it. Next, I create a preliminary highlight color by mixing ice yellow with orange-brown. I follow the same pattern over the orange-brown layer, making sure to leave some of the orange-brown showing. I paint within the perimeter of the orange-brown layer. I begin to paint striations and textures on Eddie's skin. His face looks heavily textured in the artwork, with deep creases and wrinkles everywhere. I want to maintain this look with the painted miniature. Not all of these creases and wrinkles are sculpted into this sculpture. I have to create this look myself in many areas. This is particularly evident in the striations that I paint from the lower jaw disappearing into the sunken cheeks. I highlight the face with a little ice yellow. These are fine highlights that accentuate every feature of the face. I usually reserve this final highlight for just a few locations, but here I want to emphasize every wrinkle and fold and really draw the viewer's attention toward the face. It's crazy how fast this paint up is going. I feel like I've spent time refining every aspect of this miniature, and yet I'm about to wrap this thing up. I think this is because this is a pretty simple model feature-wise. There are really only 3 areas to paint on this guy: his blue jeans, the canvas straitjacket, and his skin. I still need to wrap up a couple of detail items on Eddie, but basically we're done with this guy. I also used the ice yellow to touch up Eddie's teeth. Finally, I use Crusted Sword, add some life into Eddie's face. I thin this way down with water. I'm using this as a glaze or a filter around the sunken areas and deep creases in Eddie's flesh. This will add some depth and even more interest to the most important feature on the miniature. I'm going to rock my favorite non-metallic metal recipe for his metal collar and chains. This begins with a base coat of Pro-Acryl's Payne's Gray. I use Wolf Gray first to touch a little blue-gray glow into the eyes. Then I use it to shape some reflections on Eddie's restraints and edge highlight all of the metal bits. Finally, I use some Glacier Blue to finish off the eyes. I also use it to add final glints of light to the chains and shackle. Last for this guy, I touch up his tongue a bit. I had a lot of fun painting up this version of the Iron Maiden mascot. I'm surprised at how fast this painting went, given that I spent a good amount of time on each feature. Fortunately, there were only a few features. Don't get me wrong, this is by no means speed painting. The total paint job took me about 3 hours, but I feel like the time was well worth it and I'm very happy with the results. I'd like to thank my amazing channel members for supporting all that I do on this channel. You too can become a channel member for as little as $1.99 per month using the link in the description below. Receive perks such as early access to videos, extended versions of our painting tutorials, and even a tier that lets you decide which miniature I paint next. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of headbangers.